Good afternoon and welcome to the Exploratorium and to this special presentation of sort of making movie magic with our guest Lorne Peterson. I'm Ron Hipschman. I'm just going to host here and sort of I'm going to poke at him and ask him questions because he has a million different stories to tell about all these movies that he's been involved with in your 40 years with Industrial Light and Magic. So we're just going to take a segment of those today and just only going to talk about Indiana Jones. We hope you enjoy this. Yeah. I always do a little introductory slide for Lorne. If you know the introduction to Indiana Jones.
I started in 1975, and as I look around the room, there's only a few people that were born before that time. Maybe a half a dozen.
If you watch the introduction to Indiana Jones, they always dissolve from the Paramount Mountain into something mountainous. So we're gonna oops, my microphone slipped, there we go. We're gonna kind of go in the order of the first three movies. We're not going to hit the last movie, the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. Okay, is that okay with everybody? Yeah, okay. Yeah. I had a feeling it might be. So we're going to start off, of course, with Indiana Jones and Raiders of the Lost Ark.
I wanted to do a brief introduction. What it is, I was the head of the model shop, both for the first Star Wars and then other Star Wars and Indiana Jones and things like that. Probably worked on about 60 different films in that period of time. Although I wasn't the absolute head. Eventually it was a company of only 90 people to begin with. By the time I left, it was 2,500. So you get a big enough company like that, you can't head up every project. So because we, instead of doing one project a year, we started doing 7 projects a year or something like that. But anyway, that's what I started out making spaceships. Was hired for 2 months.
And if you want to learn more about that, in December, well, let me tell you what we're going to be doing next month. We're going to be doing Star Wars 1, 2, 3. And in December, we'll be doing Star Wars 4, 5, 6. And in January, we're going to do everything else Lorne has done. That's going to be a long one. If you go look up his IMDb page.
From Poltergeist to Pirates of the Caribbean, that kind of thing, that range.
A lot of movies, a lot of movies. So the first thing that I think we're going to talk about here is the Raiders of the Lost Ark and some of the model work that was done there. And the first model work we had was about the submarine that Indiana Jones was on. So we have the segment from the movie here. A lot of work went into this, I know. And I'm always amazed at the amount of work you guys put into making these models, like the sub.
Yeah, it was a sub. We borrowed it from Spielberg. It was used.
There it is.
Yeah. And that island is actually in San Francisco Bay. It's near Marin, off the coast of Marin there. And we borrowed a U-2 boat about 20 feet long, and put an anchor out, dragged it through the water. And when you look at it like this, you can see the water is out of scale really by the time you get to the island. It's when it's in a film, you don't see that kind of thing, but when you can look at it in a still slide, it is.
Water and fire are hard to scale, aren't they?
Yeah, very, very hard. Those are two things extremely hard.
So, by the way, Indiana Jones is in this flick. It's just in this picture here. He's just really hard to see. He's right there.
Yeah, he was a little puppet we made about that big.
So there's the actual sub.
And the white thing along the bottom, just above the two guys, I think was intended to make bubbles. That's been so long I don't remember, but it didn't really. You don't actually see bubbles, like the flow of because we dragged it quite slowly.
I notice also there's no conning tower here either.
Yeah,
so this was before you put the conning tower on. So here's a shot, I think, with the conning tower. You see Indy?
Yeah, there he is. Also, we don't have very many slides on Raiders of the Lost Ark because it wasn't, just like Star Wars wasn't capital Star Wars when we were doing it, Indiana Jones wasn't capital Indiana Jones, Raiders of the Lost Ark also. And it was first we thought we were just going to make one film, and then we thought we were going to make two, and then all of a sudden more projects started coming in, and you never realized that we were going to keep doing that for 40 years, 35 years, So it wasn't documented. Like if we were to do Raiders over again, you'd document everything about it, but we didn't, because we didn't know that it was going to be that special.
I noticed that there's a lot more footage of Temple of Doom than there was of Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Yeah.
So the next kind of effect that everyone has really talked about was these beautiful spirits of the Ark.
And when we were doing this, it's you might not imagine it, but everything isn't said about how you're going to do it. And so you tell everybody, the 5 or 6 or 10 or 20 people, well, we need a ghost to travel through. So people go away and they try different methods. And the method that we were kind of more strongly on was using wind on silk. And but it just never looked good. It always had, granted we ran it at a different film speed, but it always went only one direction. Whereas one of the guys came up with using the big water tank that we had for making clouds, and using the silk with a little skull. And I think there's a slide here.
Let's watch the sequence here.
Okay,
actually.
the sequence. Now this was the receptionist that they used for.
The receptionist?
It was a receptionist at the, she was nice, very nice looking and all that kind of stuff. So they painted her face white and put her onto like a trapeze or a table that they swung out towards the, and then they took the picture as she swung backwards. So the silk was going like this in the wind, and then they ran that piece of film backwards. So now the silk is like out grabbing you.
So they did have some full-size.
Yeah, there was a full-size ghost. And then the miniature one was done in the tank. And again, I said it was a tank that we made clouds in by injecting tempera with a little thing, and then the cloud would develop. And it was amazing how realistic the clouds look.
Just like white.
But yes,
paint.
but there was an inversion layer between. It was cold salt water on the bottom and warm clear water on the top. And so the inversion layer, you'd inject the milky tempera in the middle, and that would make the clouds. And someone has said that Eskimos couldn't be Eskimos unless clear water went on the top of salt water, because they have, at times they just have to sip the clear water off of the top of salt water. And they would have not existed if they drank salt water.
So we have a spoiler alert of what's going to happen to the Nazi now, by the way. It's not good.
Not good.
So this is, of course, a very famous shot that's become almost iconic for Raiders of the Lost Ark. As anyone who hasn't seen Raiders of the Lost Ark? Just a couple people. Wow. So
I didn't even see any. Yeah, this was done with gelatin, different colors of gelatin in a mold, and flames, hot air being pumped at him, and the camera rolled at a very slow speed.
I think we have a segment of behind the scenes of a test. His name is Test Tote. So here's the testing of it, and you can see this is not the same actor.
It was actually one of the guys at work that we took a mold off of.
So this is time lapse. So multiple layers of gelatin.
On a plaster skull.
That's pretty impressive. That was a good effect. Yeah. Kind of a classic one for Raiders, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. It was. In some ways, they could have. To me, they could have just done Tote. The two other ones aren't as effective. The exploding head and.
So we'll show that actually. You want to see the actual effect from the movie? Because there's 3 of them. There's a Tote who melts. I don't know the names. You know the names a lot better than I do.
No.
Okay. There's the middle Nazi who sucks in, and then there's the
one that explodes.
The one who explodes. And they had to put the flames in front of the exploding one to get a PG rating. if they just exploded him, it was too violent apparently for the ratings to allow that to happen, so they had to overlap flames from what I learned. So here's the actual scene. Nazis getting what they should get. Oh, sucking in, melting, and yeah, that's why they had to put the flames over him. A little bit much. But by the way, you can go out nowadays. You can actually buy a tote candle. So if you're inspired and you want to make a movie yourself and have some melting Nazis, make them out of wax, and then they will just sort of melt down. Not bad, actually. Again, sped up. Just look online for tote candle. Anyway. Okay.
Yeah, there's probably not any kid that doesn't have some Star Wars or Indiana Jones things in his room, you know, in the world, practically.
Probably not. So what are these?
Now, we needed to have what we called burning Nazis, and at various times we've used $6 million man? Is that what it was, or $5 million man?
Steve Austin.
Steve Austin, and in this case we used Han Solos because we could get the crate of them for free from the the toy companies could never say no to someone who called up from ILM that said we'd like a box full of something or other, you know. So they sent us all these, and then we made up a bunch of little Nazi uniforms and Nazi hats, and then basically about 4 or 5 of us lit them up. We had a little bit of kerosene or something on, and they lit them up and then threw them up into the air while the camera was down on the side. It's almost like it's hard for to imagine. Sometimes it's just a seat of your pants kind of thing, because they'll put on the intercom and say, at that time, would 4 people show up, please, to throw the Nazis into the air? You know,
It must have been such a cool place to work at.
Yeah.
No one ever says that on email here.
Fun things happen all the time. So you got a shot of.
You have a shot of it. So here's the Nazi. Actually, there's 2 Nazis. Looks like.
Yeah. And I don't remember what the vapor was. You know, vapors and particles and a little bit of flame and all that kind of stuff. I don't remember. You can see there's a guy with a face mask, so it had to, particles had to be flying around and exploding. I just don't remember what it was. These are all the same dolls dressed up in little German outfits, and we built this set, which was that this part where they opened up the Ark. But we shot it upside down. The model could be moved upside down, and then we shot the flames across it. And then when it's turned the other way, it looks like the flames are creeping along the ground, whereas they would normally just head up.
This way the flames stuck to the ground.
Okay. And that film was running backwards.
There's the Nazi flying.
The flaming Nazi. Oh, and this is one of the cloud effects
from the tank.
In the tank.
I don't know if you were there during this filming, but I want to know how many times they had to shoot this to get the top to land right on the mark again.
I wasn't part of the shooting of the lid going back, so I don't know. But you're right, it is.
They must have guided that with wires.
Because it hits down, and then you notice it does a little bit of a click like that, and probably the alignment was off.
That's a very cool shot, though. So that's kind of about, like you say, there wasn't that much we could find for Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark. So I think we should move on. We'll move on to Temple of Doom.
Now,
which there's
Temple of Doom. Of course, became a much bigger deal. The way some of us used to describe it is that the world wants a bigger roller coaster ride each time. So when you follow Raiders with Temple of Doom, it was like, okay, you got to come up with more ideas. There has to be more effects, more wonderful things happening. And it was a tour de force for sure. Now it doesn't seem it's hard to imagine, but we were only going to do Empire Strikes Back. But George Lucas said, but if some of my friends want to make films, we should help them too. And so, numbers of his friends all wanted to make films that made over 200 million each, as you naturally could imagine. So all of a sudden we were inundated, not totally inundated, but 1, 2, and then 4 and 3 different people that he knew asked to have special effects done by ILM up north here.
So was Spielberg in here like really early on in that group?
Oh yes, he was with Raiders.
Yeah.
Yeah, because for him we did Raiders, Poltergeist, E.T. in fairly quick succession. But anyway, yeah, I headed up the show for Temple of Doom. It was we were really crowded. We had to do it. It had to be a model-heavy show because optical was so busy. Optical is where all the bits and pieces of film put together. It's like making a collage. So you take a little bit of this, a little bit of that, mats, all the stuff, and it's like a bottleneck. So they only had so many employees, maybe 10 or so, and so it's difficult to get multiple films through it. So when we had a meeting with Spielberg and the various supervisors, I'd said, well, this is going to be, we have to do it models so that it can be shot just like a live action film, and that piece of film doesn't have to go through optical, that everything is done within the camera. There was no other way to do it because the people that were so overworked were complaining vigorously about how much work they had to do.
So the first shot that you were telling me about was this near miss shot from the airplane near the beginning of the.
Yeah, and this is a little bit of live action that's leading to the model work.
Got to jump! No more parachute!
Shorty, come on, come in here. Move the box. Come on. Help me.
Model.
Shorty, get our stuff.
Again, model.
So let's see how it's done.
But how this is done. The airplane is probably about 28 inches long, and this was done on the top of our roof in the wintertime. You can see it looks wintertime skies. But the rock, the big thing is made out of coal, and south of San Francisco you can buy, when the train comes in the late summertime, you can buy big giant pieces of coal, and you just kind of hammer away at it, and it looks like real mountains, like real rock mountains, with baking soda. When you sprinkle baking soda on it, they look like real mountains. And so I think we made this framework out of white styrofoam, and then glued the various rocks to it, and then covered it with baking soda. And you can see it in the next slide. There it is hitting. And next slide. Now I wanted to show, this illustration shows kind of what had to happen to make it work. If you just had the airplane hit the baking soda snow, that airplane would jiggle. It's on trapeze on 2 wires, called the Lydecker system. It was invented back in the 40s, I think. But anyway, it was run on wires, and if the wheel hit the snow, it would have jiggled, and it would have ruined the shot, or wouldn't have looked real. So I put a balloon underneath of the snow, and there's an escape chute. The balloon isn't terribly filled up with air, it's just enough. And then there's a tube that goes down, and the balloon is set in there, and then there's a bungee cord that keeps the balloon, so when the balloon pops, it'll fly down rather than bits and pieces of a balloon will fly up into the shot. And then there's a needle. I'm pointing to...
That's right, I'm pointing to
Oh,
it up
you
here.
are?
Yeah.
There's a needle that you can't see, a sewing needle glued to the wheel of the airplane. And it hits the balloon, it pierces through the snow, hits the balloon, and at that time, it then releases an area that's just puffy baking soda, and the wheel travels through the thing, and it makes it look like, some people would say, well, why didn't you put an explosive there? If you put an explosive, then it would, explode, and the air would probably hit the wing and again make it jiggle. But the fact that it has this huge tube down below to let the air escape, it's so much easier for the air to go down rather than through the baking soda. But a little bit of baking soda does puff up. But that's, and it's like when you when they ask you to do a shot, it's your obligation to think of all these problems. What could happen? You know, the director just gets to say the airplane hits the top of the mountain. He doesn't tell you, you know, how you're going to do it and all that kind of stuff. Next.
There's the side view.
Yeah, this is the side view, and this the aluminum foil that you see on the left there is about 8 thousandths thick, and a human hair is between 1.5 or 2 thousandths of an inch. It's pretty small. Everybody knows what a hair is. This is about 4 times thicker than an Asian hair, and you can make mountains out of it really nicely. But this is the back side, and you can see there's a dolly that runs across here with the camera, so the camera is moving with the airplane. And you can't see it, but there's wires that head across, and then a trapeze that heads down and takes up the airplane. But the airplane is about that long or so.
So we're moving to lava now.
Moving to lava. People were in danger all the time.
So
this is the running footage, isn't it?
and
And this is a puppet. This is our shot, the model shot, and there's a puppet that's half scale, or quarter scale. He's about 18 inches, and he's motorized, so he squirms just a little bit as he heads into the lava.
I think you'll see that she's also motorized too.
Yeah,
so I think we have a segment a little later on here.
Yeah.
This is just a look down into the lava pool, and here's a close up of the lava pool from the side that you never get to see.
And it's a material called methicil, and it's a food additive. It's non-harmful to people. I think it's just made out of a ground up tree sawdust.
I made some here. I'm going to move this.
And we had to get big pumps, and there's a big, huge piece of plexiglass, so it have hot lights underneath, very thick plexiglass, and a cone that heads below it, and a pump that pumps it down, and then new stuff pumps
Lava.
it in. Yeah. Yeah. Can you? I'll do my hand in it if you don't.
Sure, you can
If you
try
want,
it.
I'll clean.
Here's some paper towels. This is
great.
Methicel makes this. It's also what's used for like the alien mucus.
Yeah.
Remember Harry Potter when Cerebus was guarding the Chamber of Secrets and Ron gets that glob of snot on him? It's Methicel.
But also there's ketchup. Tomatoes. How do they make ketchup thick like it is? And it's a Methicel type of thing that's edible.
It's a food thickener.
I think
That's why your McDonald's shakes are thick.
Yeah, sometimes inexpensive milkshakes are Methicel, a little bit of Methicel in there to give it nice and thick.
Just
But
remember.
we use tanks and tanks and tanks of it for a lot of different films. Later on, when we do Mustafar, the lava planet for Sith, it was done with the lava, and all the different films, Congo, there were a whole series of films that would involve lava, and they were all Methicel. It was like one time one studio starts to make a film on ships or lava, then other studios make films on lava, and then they call up and ask, well, how did you guys do your lava? And then they try to slightly improve upon that system. But
So here's the segment. So watch when she's being lowered in, and the quarter scale actor she's kind of wiggling. And that's that motorized version. This is my super cut of lava. You have to excuse the cuts. See our model is vibrating. She spent a lot of time in that rig, didn't she? Up and down and up and down.
And I'd have to say that we eventually improved in lava from, it doesn't look as good as some of our later lava for film. It needed more black cork on the surface.
So on the surface, those rocks on the surface, they're black cork,
Yeah, black.
burned.
Yeah, you could buy big, chunky sections of black cork for some reason. I think they burned it, or what they did was they put it in an oven or something like that.
That's well, for anything where you want to color. Yeah, black cork is great. Okay.
Yeah.
Moving on to The next scene that I thought was that everyone remembers from Temple of Doom is, of course, the mine car
chase, right.
And they modeled that sort of like they did in Star Wars, which you will get to see again. The bike, hover bike race, but I found a piece of the.
Yes. What happens is sometimes we'll just use dolls on wires to put together a shot so that the director can see kind of what he's going to get. And this is very bad resolution, and it's off a TV screen. But somebody set up little railroad tracks. They put up little dolls, and they just made that leaping shot that the mine car makes.
And so you get to see the actual kind of feel for it. You can block it out, and So
and it's like, is everybody's going to salute it? Yeah, that's a good idea. Let's go with that.
There we go. So you can see the little wire that the car is held on. It's pretty good, actually. I mean, looks like model railroad train tracks.
Yeah.
It's pretty true to the.
Yeah, even a close-up of the burning wheel.
And when he knocks the supports out from the water trough.
Yeah. No, he's actually knocking out, there's dirt or coal or something that falls down there on the next guys.
There's
the thuggies trying to rip Short Round apart.
And then, so they apparently had a full-size roller coaster.
In England, they built a full-size set of this, or not really full-size, but big. It was certainly bigger than this room, probably 4 times, 5, 6 times bigger than this room. And the railroad track probably didn't go any more than, the elevation was probably at 5 feet at max or something like that, and the railroad cars were motorized. So it varies between, when it's close up with the actors, of course it's done in England with the actors in this real set, and then when it's further away, it's all model.
So here's the live actor set. That's pretty close to that flame. I was so surprised that they never actually did a ride based on this.
Yeah, it was kind of unusual, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Now, these are the stop motion puppets that go inside of the little mine car. And in case anybody doesn't know, stop motion puppets have an armature on the inside, this metal armature like this, and then they're rubber on the outside, and they can be manipulated. An arm could, do like that, and then you film it 1 frame at a time, and then run it back, and then move.
So there's you can see the mold for one of the
the metal
too.
armature would be put into the mold, and then the rubber would be injected on the inside, and then somebody would paint it, and they come out like the previous picture. But this is our model setup, again using that partly the aluminum foil, partly real rocks, partly carved rocks. But the railroad track is probably 3.25 inches apart.
There's there you can see the foil.
Yeah, you can see the foil, and sometimes we even take brown paper and crinkle it up and paint it and splatter paint on it and all that kind of stuff. Thuggies.
And here you'll actually see the foil. There's the foil. It's just a foil tunnel.
Yeah, it's kind of nice. It's self-supporting foil.
But that crinkled foil really looks, it's really nice as far as rocks go.
Yeah, so here's the stop motion animator, Tom Sanamont, and he, after every frame, he goes in and moves those arms a little bit, moves the head a little bit. And you can't see it, but there's a wire that moves there's a capstan off of a fishing line, a fishing capstan turner at one end, and it lets the slack out at the other end, and it's motorized and set up to the computer.
I think we have a shot of that. So there's
Yeah.
the camera following behind.
Someone came up with the idea, and actually won a technical award on it for the Academy, of using a Nikon, because we knew that we couldn't get the big camera inside these caves. How were we going to do that? And how were we going to run down the tracks? And somebody came up with the idea of motorizing, radio controlling the tilt and the pan on the camera, and then putting a bigger magazine on it and a motor, and allowing the Nikon to do that.
There's the magazine. Larger film magazine that went on the back of the, well, here.
Yeah, so it looked like there was actually a film crew in one of the mine cars traveling along behind them in the track.
And there you can see it moving. Slow, slow, slow.
A lot of work is done on one's knees. That's become my Achilles heel over the years. Being on your knees. So
your
much
knees are your Achilles heel?
Yeah.
Okay. And then here's the kind of the completed, well, a part of the completed scene. Again, kind of a supercut. Spoiler alert, they're going to make the jump.
This is probably why they never did it as a ride.
Because everyone would expect
Yeah.
to do the jump. That would make for a great ride. I think the sound guy should have gotten an
Yeah.
award for that too.
Yeah.
How all the railing sound just stopped at the scream. Perfect.
Yeah. So what? When Indy heads down the track, of course, Mola Ram, which is the bad guy, the incredible Indian actor, he tips this tank, and of course, you couldn't really do it on a set. It'd kill people probably. So we did it miniature. It's kind of the size of a pretty big hot tub, and then some of this, the better crinkled is probably aluminum, and then up in the top and further back is probably just brown paper. That sufficed, and that was the crew that did this particular shot. I was going to ask that we could put this in change the sequence of it so it came after.
Oh, okay.
But I wanted to show this represents the tunnel, and imagine down in the corner where the camera is that the people are only very short, but the water tank has about 4,000 pounds of water in it, and it has a trap door, and it's such that it doesn't actually jiggle the whole set. There's a little separation between the two of them, and again, people anticipated there was a problem. If you water doesn't scale very well, so you have water coming down a tunnel at people, and you would have these big basketball-sized drops of water that would be heading towards the camera that would ruin the look of it. Even though we put what's called a surfactant that the fire department uses to make water wetter. So somebody came up with the idea of using a huge air tank, huge, and then these very large air hoses, and they all faced down, and they had solenoids that were ready whenever the water approached. Just before the water approached, the air would come on and blow against this water that was heading down inexorably. You couldn't stop the water, but it took any little droplets, what would have appeared basketballs, and atomized them. And had light from the top and everything. We'll see what this looks like in reality. It is even more complex than what my simple drawing is, of course. Now this same tank, and again the structure in the back starts to show you.
You see the tank right here.
Yeah. This was what's called the water out the rock face wall. So this is where Indiana Jones, Short Round, and Willie escape out, and I think I did it with a chainsaw and styrofoam, and then we plastered that, and then we painted it and that kind of thing, so it would stay together.
This man is a master of geology.
Yeah.
Some of the stuff he's done is amazing.
And oh yeah, see, this is where the water tank is, and it leads. There's way up there.
That's without the water tank there.
Yeah. We used the same water tank for numbers of shots. Wow. So this is the inside of that tunnel. So you have to imagine, how big Indiana Jones and them, Short Round and Willie would be. But we had to have smaller and smaller people. Eventually, the women model makers were the only ones, the one that weighed 100 pounds. That she was the one that would go in and dress the set with rocks and cans and everything. And everything had to be tied down really, really strong, because of course it was going to get 4,000 pounds of water coming flying through there. Only the the oil cans were made so that they would fly through the air. But this is what the end, that illustration should probably come after this to show. This is looking up inside where those rocks were, and the sonotube extends off like that.
So this was looking up at them running, coming down.
At them running. And of course the camera would be protected by a big sheet of plexiglass, and the people wouldn't be there at that time either.
With 4,000 pounds of water coming at them?
Yeah, the camera
probably
ran
not good.
Camera ran itself.
So there's the actual, there's a still shot of it there.
Now, also you can, when you see the characters just running there before, this was before CG. Computer graphics have made the matte lines, any kind of matte lines that would show up in the characters, almost, they just don't exist anymore with computer graphic doing the opticals that way, doing those, like I said, the collage areas, putting the characters in front of the model. And this was back when it was done optically with, and here we are.
That's you.
That's me. Me, pre-gray hair, with lots of hair.
So you're just touching up here, you're painting them
Yeah, I think I have paint in one and watered paint and water in the other, and for making the streaks, you know, you'd shoot like that, the water would go in, and it'd be a little bit too much, then I'd spray a little bit and diffuse it and that kind of stuff. So now this illustrates the painters. There were a lot of scenic painters, and he's making an extension of the model. And here you can actually pretty much see the color of the stones that I carved and the painting that he did. In the movie, you can't quite see it that way. It blends really well.
I always thought it was kind of interesting here that the river that you see over here is actually on the vertical wall.
Yeah.
It's not on the ground.
Yeah, yeah. That painting actually is bent. It's almost at right angles to the wall that we made. It's not. It doesn't actually go off at an angle like that.
So there it is, from the shot from the movie.
It's a still, so you can see that they balance the colors of the two things. And this is, of course, a little overexposed for what it would be in the film.
And then here's the sequence.
This is Mullah Ram over here, this incredibly good evil actor in India.
So there's where you have all the air jets facing the other direction.
Water! 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 Come on!
It's been pointed out many times that they never could run faster than that water, of course.
Not only that, but they go into a side tunnel, the water would have been just right behind them in the side tunnel too. There's a beautiful shot of those drums, kind of. And here's your shot. There it is. So we have actually a side view from, found this on one of the makings of. So this is
From this, you'll see how incredibly important it is that the people who do live action effects perform what they do, and the actors get in the right position. When this happens, you know, you could imagine the Harrison Ford, they could have lost Harrison Ford if he'd been in the wrong place.
So I guess we're moving on.
Yeah, now on to The Last Crusade.
A lot of models in this movie.
What's that?
A lot of models in this movie.
Yeah, there were a lot of models in this movie. Dirigibles, double-wing airplanes, vehicles, all that kind of stuff.
I noticed that you actually make a lot of different versions of the same model.
Yeah.
So I noticed there's one right here that has a big tag that says "No" hanging off of it.
That probably is signs of no touch.
Oh.
There was always the tempting of people who would travel through. There were a lot of people within the company and also visitors outside the company that would go through, and there was always a temptation to touch things.
I can understand that.
Oh, actually, in the foreground are real tiny little airplanes too.
Oh, yeah,
See the real tiny little ones at the very bottom there.
in the glass box.
Yeah.
What were those used for?
They were used for in the distance. You know, sometimes it's easier to shoot. Say if you have a model that's this big, you shoot it up close, and they say, well, we need to do a shot when it's further away. You have to have a lot of real estate to be able to shoot it far away. It's just easier to ask the model shop to make a smaller version of it, and then you just put it out there 5 feet away and shoot it, and it makes it seem like it's far away. Because everybody's kind of fighting for space, and if a cameraman said, well, I need 40 feet of stage space for about 3 days, you know, everybody's saying, well, you know, I need that stage space for something else, you know, and you only need it for a little airplane, and you can have the model shop make you a little airplane and shoot it that way. And sometimes we've even done a photo cutout on a piece of glass. And sometimes in Star Wars, the big white Star Destroyer that would be at the distance would really only just be a cutout photograph about this big, glued onto a piece of glass and then shot that way.
Oh.
With black velvet behind it.
So this is just, I guess, they didn't do actually, did they do stop motion on this?
No, it wasn't stop motion. It was
Just
it would have been.
again for the distance shots.
Yeah. And this was a Citroën, I think, car. Oh, you can see the Back to the Future car in the back there.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So I can certainly carve, and I can carve a car too. But after you go for a number of years, you get people who specialize in certain things. And there was a guy named Ira who could just carve a car just like that, and he could make both sides the same. You know, it always amazed me how easily he could, seemingly easily, he could do something like that.
I was looking at them. I mean, the previous photograph had the car unpainted. Now this one now it looks like it's
the
painted.
previous actually was wood. He carved it out of wood, and then we vacuum form over the top of that with hot plastic and a vacuum. And so then you come up with car parts, and you have to put it together. But it's originally made with a buck that's carved out of wood.
And then, of course, it didn't look like this in the movie because it was old.
Aged, and
so there it is, distressed. Beautiful model.
Yeah, and this is one of the German planes that we did that in a couple of scales too.
Actually, there was a full scale of this, right?
Yeah.
There's a bigger scale.
The bigger scale, yeah. Again, out of wood. And that's Ira, the guy that I hired that could carve magically.
So here is the plane, and looks like it's inside the tunnel here.
Yeah. Also, you can see the aluminum foil on the back tail, where it supposedly was torn up. You know, so somebody just crinkled some aluminum foil and stuck it there, and it suffices for looking like it's broken off.
So this is the scene where the plane enters the tunnel and gets its wings sheared off.
Right.
So
yeah, we made this long tunnel, and of course the airplane is pulled along on a cable. And that's probably a combination of aluminum foil and paper, and then sprayed with spray foam.
It's very clever how you made it so you could open it up too, so you could actually work on it easily.
Yeah. Yeah, so this is, would be entering the tunnel.
There's a troll in that tunnel.
Yeah.
And then there's the full size.
Again, you spend a lot of time on your knees, and one of the older than me, I also retired, but retired before me, he was asked one time, friends were asking him, what would you do different in your life if you had to do it over again? And he said, I'd wear knee pads more often, which we didn't always do. You know.
Right. So that's the full-size German
full-size
plane.
airplane.
And I think we have a piece from sort of a behind-the-scenes piece of this being towed by the car, which actually is not moving. So there's the plane sort of in the background, and I noticed that the car is totally stationary during that scene, and but they have a moving.
It probably was done on 2 separate pieces of film, and when you see it, there's a projection there of the side of the tunnel. So
it looks like that's actually a moving screen.
Yeah.
On a roll.
It's the screen isn't rolling. I think it's well, I'm not absolutely sure, but somebody would have timed the speed of the airplane going by and the background going by so that they, when they did the right frame rate, then the speed was right.
Okay, we got to see that one again.
Yeah. There's a considerable amount of mathematics to figuring out, 25 frames a second equals 1 second of film time. How fast would the airplane go? How fast would the background go? And if that kind of thing is off, human beings really, you just know something is wrong. And when it's done right, you just assume that it is correct. But human beings are very sensitive to, well, the background is moving, and the background wouldn't do that to the foreground.
Right. So here's the actual scene from the movie. I love Sean Connery.
This is intolerable! This could be close!
In films, bad guys can never hit good guys. It's not true of reality. But, that airplane shooting the car to the side, never hit it. Yeah, those would be two separate pieces of film together.
Now, that was a model running through the flaming debris, or was that an actual car?
That was an actual car.
So that was not the only time you guys have used a tunnel, by the way, which we're going to see
they found
in January.
Yeah, we've used tunnel a lot, but they found a tunnel in somewhere in Europe, I think, that would look like that.
Oh, yeah?
Have the car go through.
So this is not the tunnel from
No,
Last
this
Crusade.
is from Mission Impossible,
Mission
I think.
Impossible.
But it's like once you have a good idea, you tend to use that good idea other times. So I think probably the director saw the film, and then he's the director of Mission Impossible. He said, "Yeah, I'd like to have a helicopter flaming and coming through a tunnel." So we did a helicopter instead of an airplane going through a tunnel.
So I think this last piece is the famous tank piece.
Yeah, this where Indiana Jones is in danger on the tank. He rides up the horse, jumps onto the tank, all that stuff, and eventually the tank does heads off the cliff. So this is a live action tank, and then that's a miniature tank there. Miniature meaning about 5 feet long, with a screaming Nazi again. That's the model again.
So that model's about 5 feet long?
It's about 5 or 6 feet long, and actually it was made out of metal, and it was great, but it did get thrown away.
So there's the
the-
shot.
Yeah, it was too bad.
You said you saw this sticking out of the dumpster or something?
I did. The stage guys, there's different departments, and it was in their way, and they kept saying, "Lorne, move that thing. We don't want it. We're our area." And I delayed moving it, and they said, "Move it," and I delayed moving it, and they just picked it up with the forklift and threw it into the dumpster. And I saved a few parts off of it, but it was too heavy. It weighed. I don't know, it weighed 800 pounds or something like that.
So you wanted to have that heft so that when it did hit, it had that
Exactly.
kind of
Yeah, if it had
natural
only
look to
weighed, say, 100 pounds or something like that, it would have flipped. So it had to be, it was made out of good steel and motors and all that kind of stuff.
So this is one that didn't make it up into the Lucas archives.
Yeah. I was just thinking when you see thinking about the Nazis is that never again will we have such a black and a white villain in the world. Everything is more shades of gray, as Nazis. They're never. It'll probably never happen again, quite so starkly black and white.
Hopefully not. So
Yeah.
next month, on the third Sunday of the month, which I forget the date.
Yeah, but we're also going to have some questions before.
Oh yeah,
we do
we'll get to questions. I just want to let people know that that next month, and I'm going to have to look at my phone here to give you the exact date. Sorry about that. I should know these things. the third Sunday is the 19th. We're going to be doing Star Wars 1, 2, 3. So you'll be able to get a little bit of a look behind the scenes of how they did. Here's the pod race arena.
Yeah, and we built it on top of a platform about 3 feet high, so the camera could get down low, human level, and this was a very iconic scene where there's a fly-in to this model.
So I think Lorne has some time for some questions. So
Yeah.
if you have any questions, please ask. Oh, we'll get them, and we'll get the microphone out to you so that everyone can hear you.
Wondering if there's is there room for model making going forward here? Is in the processes you described, which now are 30 years old or so,
Yeah.
are they using models at all anymore?
Well, me personally, I retired. The company is much smaller in San Rafael that makes models because it separated from Lucasfilm. And it's a yes and no answer to a question. There were 7 model makers on the first show. There were over 102 by the time we did Sith. So there's a lot more model work, even though the emphasis was on CG. At the time, there was 650 computer graphic artists. At the same time, there were 102 model makers. So all films these days, like Lone Ranger, all that bridge falling and everything like that is a model. It was done as huge, big as this room. Big water tank drops to destroy towns are all done as models. It's much more dissipated around the world. You can go to London, Czechoslovakia, Georgia, the state of Georgia and the country of Georgia. You can go to Australia, New Zealand, and get model work done. A lot of model work is done in Australia too, New Zealand, all of the Hobbit and that kind of thing.
Weta.
But it isn't like you could. I don't know if I could easily say go for it as a career, because my participation went like this, and then when I retired, it was peaking like that, and it diminished at least in the Bay Area around that time. But the combination of model and CG is incredible, and it still exists today. It's just that you try to sell a movie. People that sell a movie, they sold Star Wars as a model, the first Star Wars as a model show. They sold Empire Strikes Back as a stop motion show. They sold Jedi as a creature show, the Ewoks and all that kind of stuff. And then when Phantom Menace comes along, it's sold as a computer graphics show. But it doesn't mean that there isn't an emphasis on models and other departments all the way along the line. It's just that they have to sell it somehow, and if they sell it with just a cornucopia of things, people are confused, and they, well, I don't know, what it's going to be. I saw the trailer, but it was so confusing, where they want one main idea, and it's really marketing that makes people believe that it's all done by CG these days.
I know you said you're retired, but is most of what's done at Presidio now post-production work, or?
I was looking the other direction, and I can't hear as well, and I have to see the person's face. And
I'm sorry, I know you said you're retired, but do you know most of what's done at the Presidio now, is that post-production work, or what do they actually do?
Well, no, it's all CG work, computer graphics work. There varies, sometimes 2,000 people there, 1,500, something like that, but the great preponderance of them is computer graphic people. And just as in England, and every film you see, if you stay late enough, you see computer graphic work done. I'm not talking about computer graphic work, but if anybody that's old enough here to have seen Out of Africa, there was models in Out of Africa. The trains across the veldt in the background weren't with giraffes and things like that weren't real. We did that particular movie, and no one ever thinks that Out of Africa had models in it. There almost isn't. There aren't any movies. There are movies that don't have models in it, but there's almost no movies that don't have computer graphic work in it these days. So that field, when people get out of college, I've heard they can make $60,000-$80,000 a year right away. Maybe not every single one of them, but I didn't make anything near that when I got out of college.
Anyone else have a question?
Over there.
We'll get you.
I was wondering if at any point you reuse some of the models from, say, Indiana Jones, maybe not the Star Wars, but maybe like Pirates of the Caribbean, something that aesthetically you could just transpose whatever you made, like say a truck or something.
You know, I didn't quite hear the.
What was the
Oh,
first
sorry.
part?
I was wondering if you reused any of the models from one movie
Oh,
into
yes.
another.
Yes, we would. Obviously, the White Star Destroyer was used in a number of other films, and sometimes, the land speeder was modified to be in a junkyard. Luke's land speeder. In some ways, it isn't necessarily the best idea when you look back on it, because many times we had to change it back again to its original form, and then there isn't now two objects to display. There aren't two objects that are worth a lot of money. It's when you look back on it, it's not the best of things to do. And sometimes we were forced to do it thinking expediency as far as money is concerned, short-term thinking. Long-term thinking, it wasn't a good idea. And because many times they would tell us, like, no, we'll never have you change it back. We want you to change it. And then we would wait 3 months and they'd say, you know what, we need to have you change it back again. And so what looked like they were saving money didn't save money.
The submarine.
Yeah, the submarine was for the film 1941, a Steven Spielberg film done in 1980 maybe, or something like that. I can't remember. And we called him up and said, could we use your submarine? And they just said, you can have it, and sent it up north. But yeah, that got used again.
It wasn't the full-size submarine also reused from a different film?
But we didn't. I think for Raiders, that was a mock-up that they made, plywood and things like that.
Wasn't it used from Dust Boat?
Yeah, you're right. It was used from Dust Boat. So there's only so many U-2 boats in the world, that we didn't sink.
Who has the microphone?
Did you bother to, or have time to, document how you made particular models? So like, to help people going forward?
Well, there was as we went on, there was no still department on the first show, on Star Wars. Everybody had to grab a camera and take a picture, and so there weren't an awful lot of documentation. But as we went on, we had a certain historical sense of what we were doing, and there was a still department with first one person, and then 2 people, and then 3 people, and they documented things every single day. So, on computers now and thumb drives, there's more visual information than you could ever possibly consume. It's like we could sit down for 1 hour-long session and just talk about water out the rock face wall and how that was done, or that kind of thing. Not that anybody wants to do that necessarily, but and now the problem is organizing all that stuff, the tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of images. I've been asked to help identify the people in the photograph, and when it was on slide pages, and you spend the whole day going like this and making notes, and it's not an easy 3 days of that, and your neck is worn out, But when they're all on a disc and everything, it's a little bit better. But
being an archivist is a thankless job.
Oh my God, yeah.
By the way, speaking of documentation, Lorne has a great book out which you can go and find called Sculpting a Galaxy. So if you want more interesting pictures and behind the scenes, a lot of it is in his book.
It is a coffee.
He would
table.
not plug it, but I am going to shamelessly plug this book.
It is a coffee table book, and it's a great one to give as a present to either an adult or a kid. But as all coffee books, it's kind of hitting the tops of the waves. I wrote kind of in depth, and then they kept saying, well, it's got to fit on a page and a half, so they'd say on Monday, come back and trim it down what you had to say so we can fit it on a page and a half or something like that. So you know, when you wrote it, you look at the final product and you think, oh God, it isn't really as in depth as you know. They didn't want a book this thick.
It's
in
a
other words.
good book. Go buy it.
What's that?
Your real book. Is your real book archived?
No, it isn't.
Why may we see in the future maybe a detailed Lorne Peterson?
Somebody does have a record of it. I should get in touch with him and get the. What we did was a guy and I named Pablo Hidalgo, who is intensely into Star Wars and all the films. We got together every Sunday for 7 hours, broke for an hour lunch, and we did it for 7 weeks. And so he just asked questions. So it's how much would be 7 weeks times 7 hours? Is that 144 hours or something like that? Or
7 weeks times 7 hours?
yeah.
Wow, it's a lot.
Oh, it's a lot. Anyway, so talking about all the different, and I have a really good memory, which is, you know, as more and more people drop out that don't have a good memory, then my memory becomes the truth in a way. If they can't, if they can't dispute it, you know. You know, I remember for some reason I just remember little obscure stories about the way that. We did things, you know, all that period of time.
You got a lot of stories in you.
A lot of stories. I'll tell you one. Do we have enough time for a 5-minute story?
I don't know if anybody here wants to hear any more of your stories.
Yeah, okay. But we went to, on the first Star Wars, we went to Guatemala and shot the pyramids in Guatemala. And that shot where the guard is in the tower and it's actually a gray trash can, and that's me in the trash can. You know, guarding, you know, scanning for the Millennium Falcon. Well, only the three of us went, and we had to go up on the top of the pyramids each morning, you know, like covered with jungle. There's now staircases to get up there, but at the time it was, you know, like this. So we stayed in little palapas. It was a dirt runway, a DC-3 or a DC-10, I'm not sure which one it was, took us there, and we stayed there a little over a week.
It's whatever you say it was.
Whatever I say it was. And so we stayed in these little palapas, which are grass-covered hut kind of things, and there was a big hut that was used for dinner and breakfast and lunch if you were there. And so we also traveled with a translator who could speak about 5 languages from the studio. He was a very sophisticated older guy when we were we were 30. And the first night, it was always chicken, black beans, and tortillas. Chicken, black beans, and tortillas, and gallo beer. There was no variation to dinner ever. And so when the dessert came, well, we got cake, and it was vanilla cake with no icing. It was you know, in a pan, it was about that thick, and each of us got a little square about 1.5 inches by 1.5 inches, and with our coffee. And Pepe Lenzi, the very sophisticated guy from the studio, calls the woman over and says in Spanish, I can understand a little bit of Spanish, that, you know, we're from Hollywood, a big Hollywood film. These are important people. Blah blah blah. We're bringing money to your town, or it isn't even a town, to the jungle. We could have more cake, I think, you know. And she, you know, she understands the whole thing and goes away. So we're there again the next night, having chicken, black beans, tortillas, and gallo beer, and we get a piece of cake that's about 4.5 inches by 4.5 inches by 1.5 inches thick. And we're kind of pleased with ourselves, you know, about how much cake we're getting. And a young woman who was in her 20s came over, and she was traveling by herself, and she said, from now on, I'm going to be eating with you guys. And we thought, well, that's pleasant, you know, come on, sit with us, sure. And somebody said, well, how come? And she said, well, in case you didn't notice, no one got any cake tonight, and you got big giant pieces. So she only had one 9x9 pan, and so she just cut it in how many pieces were there each night, and so you could get a bigger or a smaller piece depending on. So we had to call her over again and go back to the old system, because everybody was, you know, straining to see why we got big pieces of cake and no one got any. But anyway, there were a million stories like that, and for people that are old enough who would remember a television show called The Naked City, they always ended the program by a guy on a rampway above a railroad yard, and he'd say, there's a million stories in the big city, and this is only one of them. So there's more to go on other days.
By the way, we have an artifact here.
Oh.
This is not the one from the movie, but it's a cast of the actual one from the movie, which Cale, our tech guy up there, who was the fellow who made this cast? Sean House.
Yeah.
So that was cast from the original. The original is in the archive, which is on Skywalker Ranch. Lorne was nice enough to take Cale and I up to the archive and let us actually look at the actual models from the movie. It's pretty stunning. The detail that these guys would build into movies is unbelievable. Couldn't possibly see that much detail in the movie. I can't believe. But
no, the object was to never have the model undetailed so that something would be revealed. You had to have another layer of things that were possible, because sometimes if they would say, well, we'll only be 5 feet away from the model in a month, they would say, no, now we need to be about 18 inches. And so if you underbuilt it, you would have a problem. I was going to say about this particular piece is off of a mold that was under my desk probably 30 years ago. And I was going to go on a 2-week vacation, and there was a new employee who was super fan Star Wars, Indiana Jones, and someone said, God, look at all this stuff around here, you know. And somebody said, yeah, underneath Lorne's desk is the model for the idol. Well, unbeknownst to me, that mold parts were made out of those molds and distributed across friends in LA and all that kind of stuff while I was on vacation. And every single one of them is a multiple generation off of that original mold that was underneath my desk, you know, that got duplicated over and over again.
we actually saw the original sitting in the archive up there. And one thing that I never knew and that never showed up in the movies was the eyes of the original idol actually could move, but it never showed it on the screen.
Yeah, they were radio controlled, and they were glass. And the original concept from the script was that as Indiana Jones approached the idol, the eyes would slightly move, you know, so it gave it a certain lifelike quality. And when they got to shooting and everything, it just passed by, and it wasn't necessary to add the drama to him stepping on the stones and all that kind of stuff, and activating the sand and the gold, which you have something to say about that.
The gold?
The gold and the sand.
A statue of this size, if it was made of solid gold, would probably weigh about 50 pounds. So slinging it into the sack on your back and throwing it across the pit,
Yeah.
not going to happen.
Yeah.
Not going to happen.
Or finding a bag of sand that was the equivalent weight.
Exactly, yeah.
Wouldn't make it.
Sand is about, probably about a tenth as dense. So you'd have to have this giant sack of sand.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. There's one more artifact that you have down here that I thought was, this is a goodie too. Ooh, yeah. So tell us about this.
It's, you know, he'd asked me, it was just one of the hats, you know, film-used hats, and there was a box probably 3 feet by 3 feet by 3 feet, just full of hats, and there was another one full of whips, and there was another one full of jackets, you know, of various degrees of distress, you know, from brand new to dragged under a truck kind of thing. So they would always be ready with the appropriate jacket, the costume.
This is an undistressed.
Undistressed version of it, yeah. And
made in England.
I'd said if we have time, any adults or kids that want to do a selfie with the hat, they're welcome to do that.
It fits me.
Yeah, it fits you. As I said, everybody that works at a sportatorium has a fat head.
So we'll have that up. We have,
Yeah.
if you want to touch the methyl cellulose, we have.
Yeah.
I have a bucket of it. It's,
Your hand comes out totally dry after you wipe it off, and then it just turns to dust again. It's like I said, it's made out of ground up tree sawdust or something.
There's a warning on it. If you have some on your hand and you let it dry on your hand, so the powder's now on your hand, the next time your hand gets wet, it's going to get slimy.
Yeah.
So just remember that if you touch this stuff. We'll have some paper towels here too.
If kids do it, you do it and you go home, let your hand dry out, you know, on the way home like this, and then when your parents, you know, you're having dinner and all that stuff, and you dip your hand in some water ahead of time, and then reach for the rolls, dripping.
Yep.
You know,
It's pretty mucusy.
there's pretty mucusy, that's for sure.
Thank you all for coming. If there's no other questions,
Well, thanks for
Thank
having
you.
me here, too.
next month, November 19th, Star Wars 1, 2, 3.